You've already gone through one pandemic. Let's hope there's not another, although a lot of people predict that there will be in our lifetimes. Do you feel like we're better prepared for a future one to come?
Frankly, I think we are worse prepared. Whoa. The things that happened during that period of time were magical.
Magical how?
Magical in the way that we were able to achieve things that we didn't think that we could. And why is that? Because we have a fantastic collaboration between the public and private sector. But suddenly, it has been politicized so much. So it became a political debate rather than a scientific or a celebration of human ingenuity.
Albert Bourla is known for achieving impossible things. As the CEO of Pfizer, a company he first joined in 1993, Bourla led the company through COVID-19. He says President Trump called him every week, and his team worked around the clock to deliver. Pfizer invented the first FDA-approved COVID vaccine and treatment, Paxlovid. Business soared to record revenue. Fast forward to today, and Bourla is chasing his next moonshot, solving cancer and other revolutionary drugs like GLP-1s. And the stakes are high. The company is facing a patent cliff for some of its most lucrative drugs, and the COVID revenue bump it enjoyed is over. Then there's President Trump, who Bourla says still frequently calls him, but for a new reason. He wants Americans to pay less for drugs. In this episode of Titans, Bourla told me about the 10-day deal he reached with the Trump administration that would set the agenda for the entire pharmaceutical industry for the next few years. In our discussion, he also shared how he leads through extreme conditions and how AI will be used in drug discovery. I'm Alyson Shontell, and this is Fortune 500 Titans and Disruptors of Industry. Albert, it is so nice to spend time with you today. Thank you for joining me. So we were discussing that on Monday, March 15th, 1993, was the first day of the rest of your life. It's the day that you joined Pfizer in Greece, actually, in the animal health department. I want to take us back to that point and a little bit before that. I'm wondering how your upbringing in Greece may have shaped you into the CEO you are today and might have brought you to Pfizer in the first place. I understand your parents were Holocaust survivors. So I just want to understand from you, what was about your upbringing that you think helped you position yourself for the CEO spot?
First of all, it's a great pleasure, Alyson, to be with you. And I have watched many of your podcasts, and they are all wonderful. And I'm very proud that you invited me to be part of it. I grew up in a middle-class family. My parents, they were not very rich, but we have everything we needed. We grew up in an environment that we were very well protected from my father, who had a very big ambition to become scientist. And of course, he couldn't. He wanted me to become a scientist. So I got that, I think, from him. From my mom, I got more her personality drive. She was someone that was extremely optimistic in life. She would think that every obstacle is an opportunity to do something better. And she would think that nothing is impossible. And she would use her experience of surviving the Holocaust, which was quite dramatic because she was scheduled to be executed and she was placed in front of a firing squad. But a Christian relative paid bribes, and it was successful at the last moment. So they removed her from the line and moved her back, and she could hear the machine guns killing everybody else. So from her perspective, she could be someone who will bring to me hate for those that they did bad to us. Never. Yeah. She was always bringing to me, life is miraculous. I was there and suddenly I survived. And look at me now, I have you and your sister. So nothing is impossible. So wow. That's my mom. So I think I took that from her.
Yeah, so a love of science and resilience and an optimism despite the hardship. That's an incredible foundation. Mm-hmm. So you joined Pfizer, and it's unique to be able to build a career within one place over the course of 30 plus years. I'm curious, if you look back on your time at Pfizer, was there a key milestone moment where you felt like, oh, wow, I could be the company's CEO. I could be on that path?
Only very, very late in my career. I joined Pfizer in Greece and I didn't want to join the industry. My vision at that time was to become a professor. work in academia, which this is where I was working. I was doing my PhD in addition to be veterinarian. But Pfizer really wanted someone there, and they made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. So when I joined Pfizer in Athens from Thessaloniki, I was thinking I'm going for a sabbatical. But I
Not so much.
Sabbatical, but 32 years. After, I feel that I loved it. So I never looked back. I never missed. Let me go back to academia. I wanted to do a career in the private sector because I enjoyed the creativity, but also the dynamism, the less bureaucracy than the public sector. That was fascinating for me. I was offered very early in my career opportunities to go international, to have an international career. So 3 years later, I left in '96, and I went to Brussels, and then I took now a different role from scientific to marketing, and from only Greece to marketing of the entire region. That felt even more intriguing, and then I moved to Poland, where my kids were born, by the way, and I was a country manager, and then I became director of Eastern Europe, and then I went back to Brussels, and then in 2001 I came to the US.
Wow. So a lot of international experience and a lot of different growth opportunities in different departments and exposure to different areas of Pfizer.
Correct.
You think those were the two really key things to becoming eventually suited for the CEO position?
I don't know if that made me suited for the CEO position, but certainly shaped who I am. I had the opportunity to live with so many different cultures, within so many different cultures, and work with even more, because I had international assignments in my career. And I learned to be respectful of the difference of the others. I learned to be sensitive as to how you need to behave if you want to achieve results, if you want to inspire people. It's different things that you need to say to the US and different things that you need to say to Japan. So it's all of that made me having a better understanding of the value of diversity, but also only when you manage diversity the right way.
One of the first moves that you really helped shepherd is Pfizer had a couple different businesses, and you wanted to make it very science-focused, less consumer-focused, and you made a decision to push out the consumer side, which was about 25% of Pfizer's revenue at the time. Not a small or easy decision to make. I'm curious how you came in with that kind of conviction to make a big, bold change like that versus just kind of seeing the status quo.
Yes. First of all, you were right. It was 25% of the revenues at the time. It was not only consumer, it was two businesses that we divested, collectively 25%. The other one was also not scientific-based. The main goal was to create a company that it is pure science-based, pure innovation-based, a company that will develop innovation but can change the world. I felt that the company Pfizer had all the elements to be successful in such a journey, and I took the risk. And 19, pretty much I devoted to doing that, not only divesting business that were not scientific, but also changing the culture, changing the capital allocation within the company. I increased the R&D budgets, I increased the digital budgets at 19, so that we can thrive in innovation. And then at the end of the year, when we were ready, COVID hit.
I want to just kind of stress the magnitude of the change you had to make. One of the stats was that prior to COVID, you had been producing about 200 million doses of vaccines per year. And you had to scale that to be suddenly 3 billion doses in a year. How do you tackle things like that as an org that just seem unfeasible?
Yeah, that's my mom coming out, that nothing is impossible, but how to convince the others. I found out through that process that when you ask people to do things that they are perceived difficult or impossible, the first thing that they do, it is to use all their brain power to develop the arguments, articulated in a PowerPoint presentation, why cannot we make? That's always the case. It is the same principles like when you try to do a vaccine in 9 months rather than in 9 years. But I would say it is equally, if not even more impressive, the manufacturing piece. Usually, most of the glory went to our scientists in the lab that made the vaccines, but we had so many scientists in the manufacturing site and workers and engineers in the manufacturing sites that did miracles. The same principle, you need to make it, doses will be needed, people is dying, you need to exceed yourself, you need to use ingenuity, don't try to convince me why you cannot make it, try to find ways to make it happen, and they do it. Because people, when you ask them to do things and they understand that this is a serious request, they deliver more than what they think. Within a week, they stopped worrying how to convince you that cannot be done. And they start worrying how they can find ways to overcome the obstacles and make it happen. And this is when they can come and surprise you of how much they can achieve when they are focusing on how to resolve issues and when they are all in. And that was the secret with Pfizer.
During the leadership time of COVID, you had signs over the office that said, "Time is life." And I've heard you describe sort of how you motivated the team a little bit unfairly as emotional blackmail, where you would say, imagine if we delay this even a month. I want you to calculate how many more people will die. That's pretty dramatic, but do you think that was really essential to getting them to kind of stop saying no?
I'm afraid it was. I still believe it was an emotional blackmail because I was asking them to do something impossible, and then I was putting on their shoulders the weight that if they don't make it, people will die. That happened in several occasions when they came and they said, look, I think we will have 3 weeks delay on that. And then I did say, why don't you go and calculate how many people will die in 3 weeks?
What a powerful
and come back and tell me. And I feel a little bit guilty about it. But also, I know that played a key role in not only saving the world and the economy and the society, but make them feel the most important people on earth, those that were able to deliver, and they will never forget.
During the pandemic, one of the criticisms that Pfizer faced despite coming out with this vaccine was the profiting from it, and also how pricing was figured out for other countries throughout the world. I'm wondering if you think that that was handled in the right way. Would you price things differently the next time? Would there be different business considerations in how you would do a future pandemic?
It was priced the right way. I don't have any regrets on that. It was very social sensitive. We had the tier pricing. US and other rich nations, they had one tier. Then middle-income countries, they had almost half of that. And then the low-income countries were given almost for free. The US and high-income countries, the price that they had to pay was the price of a takeaway meal. As much as you want to buy today, or at that time, to buy your meal in McDonald's, the COVID would cost the same. So it was very reasonable priced. We made a lot of money because we made 3.5 billion doses. Of course, you can make a lot of money when you do that. But it was not sustainable, of course, because of our results. COVID went down, was under control, so you don't have to sell anymore.
Pfizer's COVID vaccine launched its earnings to record highs in 2022, helping the company reach a record-breaking $100 billion in sales. That dropped by about 41% the next year as COVID vaccine sales slowed. Pfizer's stock is still down significantly from its peak in 2021. Pfizer is also facing a patent cliff, which means a number of its patents on its high-earning drugs are set to expire in the next few years. This would allow for competitors to produce cheaper generics, which could significantly hurt Pfizer's sales. The COVID business was obviously incredible, maybe a one-time bump for your business. And you also are facing some very successful patents that people call it the patent cliff. Over the next few years, some very lucrative patents will be rolling off and generic drugs will be able to come onto the market. And so there has been some concern about what does Pfizer's business look like? How can it be healthy? How can it be strong when these two big cash cows for it are diminishing? How are you thinking about building a stable foundation and kind of making up for the lost revenue of those two big money drivers and getting to revenue growth again? I think you said by 2030 or 2029, you expect to be really back there.
That's true. And we expect to be not only back in growth, but back in very strong exponential growth. COVID was a great success for the company, skyrocketed us in at all times high, saved the world and gave us a lot of profits, but it was not a sustainable franchise at the level that we experienced it in the years that we had the COVID crisis. In 2022, our COVID revenues went to $56 billion. $56 billion. The next year, in 23, they dropped to 12. Now they are around 5, 6. So financially for the company was a major hit. And that was reflected in our stock price. And that is a different story, you know, when you go from mediocrity to something lesser, and very different if you go from the top of the hill. You are the best company. You are the best named CEO. The people in Pfizer are the most proud employees in the world. Suddenly to have a financial drop, it hurts a lot. And that creates emotional reactions to everyone in the company, including me. So it was a very difficult period for me, the year 2023. But I do believe that the winners in life are differentiated from the losers in life because the winners never fall. The winners always stand up again. And that's, I think, what we did. We invested in 23 billions of dollars in new business development opportunities because we knew that we need to do that to overcome both the COVID losses, but also, even more importantly, the loss of exclusivity, the patent cliff that we are going to face starting in 26, 27, and 28. And we did these investments. We went back to rebuild our commercial operations, to restore the glory of them, and 24 and 25 were spectacular years in the marketplace. We did significant changes in the research engine and significant acquisitions. So I think we have all the elements that we need to weather the period of LOEs, what it is ahead of us, and emerge very strong, with very strong growth, which will be based on us changing the lives of millions and millions of patients.
And so you had the vaccine the first year and then the treatment the next year, and you over-delivered. I'm curious about what happens after you over-deliver so spectacularly to the team. How do you motivate them to do something else that could ever be as great as that mission that they felt like, where they were really saving lives, saving the world, really, the purpose was so clear. How do you create a next purpose for them? And then as a CEO, how do you create a next purpose for yourself?
We used all the profits that we were able to generate during the COVID period, which was significant, to reinvest them. And the area that we picked was cancer. This is where the bulk of our investments were. And for several reasons. One, because we were already good at cancer. And the second was that we had a fantastic opportunity with the acquisition of Seagen to double down on it. But also because cancer is so personal. And cancer affects so much the world and affects so much our colleagues. And I knew that that's a wonderful pivot. We save the world from COVID, now we'll save the world from cancer. So that was the goal, and that's what we tried to do. And I think we are delivering on it. We had some remarkable readouts on cancer. It's not going to be as dramatic like in COVID. You don't have a vaccine one day, and then next morning you do have a vaccine. Now cancer, we are fighting. Science fights cancer for decades. So the improvements will be incremental. But when you have doubling the survival rate, which where we had 3 or 4 studies in the last 2 years, that we were able in massive cancers, in bladder cancer, in prostate cancer, to double the survival rate. Colorectal cancer, which is a cancer that affects so many young people, that's transformational. Those people are feeling that what they do has a purpose that nowhere else can find.
Pfizer is now investing heavily in research and development opportunities, which span oncology, biotechnology, and new vaccines. The company has been active in the mergers and acquisition sphere as well. At the end of 2025, the company purchased Metsera, a clinical stage biotech company, following a contentious, months-long bidding war with Novo Nordisk.
So as you look at your pipeline of products, where do you think is the most value going to be derived in the future? It sounds like cancer is definitely a bucket.
Right now, we orient more than 40% of our yearly R&D expenses to cancer.
And how much do you spend on R&D a year?
11 billion approximately.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a significant amount that goes to cancer. This is where we have a dramatic substrate of first of all, of a marketed portfolio. In the market right now in the US, we are number 3rd company in cancer. But we have a very strong phase 3, very strong phase 2, very strong phase 1, and scientists that really are tackling now cutting edge technologies to be able to deliver solutions for cancer. The next wave, Pfizer was always a primary care company and company that thrives in marketplaces where massive manufacturing is needed, massive clinical infrastructure is needed, which is the case in primary care or vaccines, thousands and thousands of patients in clinical trials, and massive commercial execution with field forces and marketing teams around the world. For us, the big play on internal medicine was obesity. We went very early with GLP-1s. We believed that GLP-1s could become a significant differentiator, and we developed very early a pipeline of oral GLP-1s that at the time no one had. Unfortunately, the products didn't work. They had good efficacy, actually good tolerability, but they had toxicity in the liver, which we discovered, and of course we stopped the program. And that's why now we had all this infrastructure, we have the right to win in this marketplace, but we don't have the portfolio. And this is where the acquisition of Metsera came, that I think positions us now as a second very big driver of growth to be the obesity market.
So I want to talk about the Metsera acquisition because it is big, and it's been described as a Game of Thrones between you and Novo Nordisk to acquire that company.
There's only one throne. I don't think.
Well, you are the king. Yeah, it sounds like you made a bid in August. The price went up significantly since. I think it was like a $7 billion sum that you offered at the time, went up to 10. What's it like behind the scenes of a major acquisition like that?
Usually things are moving very fast at the last moment, but they are cooking for very, very, very long time. We were flirting with Metsera before they go into an IPO when the founders had just built a pipeline and they were looking for opportunities. We know their pipeline. We were watching it. We did repeated due diligence to see their data. There was a period of time that after their IPO that our molecules had failed. So we felt that's the time to make a move. And then we started re-engaging with them. Things were going up and down for a period of time. But eventually we were able to sign a deal with them. It took quite a bit of time, took several meetings between me and the principals of their board and the CEO, between our scientists that they met their scientists, and we had a deal. And everything was moving to a close, but then we had this bid from Novo Nordisk that complicated things. So it was, 10 days of wildness, as you described it, Games of Thrones. And
Were there any moments where you thought, shoot, we've lost it?
Of course, I was considering as a possibility, but again, my mom came out to me.
Don't you dare.
We will not lose it, I told everyone. That's it. We are going to get it. Don't worry. Because, my people were devastated. There were people that they gave months of their life, day and night, to develop protocols for how these products will be developed in case we were buying them. And how we can maximize the opportunity. And then they got it. And they started, the same people, getting day and night into meetings with the Metsera colleagues to make sure that they will go. And then suddenly they see Novo coming and complicating things. And what we thought is in our pocket suddenly maybe not. So I reassure all, we will never going to lose that. We are going to make it happen.
As Pfizer turns away from consumer healthcare to focus on research and development, it is also working with the Trump administration to offer most favorable nation pricing on a number of its products.
The forgotten man will be able to afford these drugs now.
According to Pfizer, that means offering some drugs at discounts as high as 50%. Pfizer is one of a number of pharma companies, including Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, who agreed to offer discounted drugs through Medicaid. The company has also committed $70 billion to research, development, and capital projects in the United States over the next few years.
So recently there was big news with the Trump administration. You and President Trump announced that Pfizer would be participating in reducing the cost of some drugs for Americans to the tune of about 50% in some cases or more. You also announced that American manufacturing would be brought here into the States. You already have 13 facilities, I believe, but even more will be committed to in the United States. So I'm wondering, how did you and the president arrive at this? What was behind the scenes of the deal?
Look, I knew the president from the first term. I knew him because he was, as you remember, personally and heavily involved in managing the COVID crisis. And we were among the few companies that were in the forefront of developing a solution. So he would call me every week. And he would ask.
The phone and you had a call from the president?
Yes. And that was constant. He will go into details and he will ask how the study is going, how FDA can help, how operational speed can help. So that, because we had setbacks and successes during that period, which I was explaining to him, that created a bonding. No matter what are your political views, when you are working to save the world, I mean, that creates a bonding. And of course, then I have always a tendency to never forget my friend. So when he left, I never turned the page on him. I was maintaining a human relationship with him. And then he came back, to the surprise of many, if not all. And we pick it up again from where we left it, and we started discussing about the future of healthcare in America. And it was very clear to me that what it was in his mind in the first administration now had become a very intensive itch that needed to be scratched. He was adamant that he can't tolerate that other rich nations pay for the same medicines less than Americans are paying, or the American healthcare system is paying.
Why would Americans pay more?
I fully agree. That was not a sustainable situation. It's not only in medicines, by the way. If you compare the prices of a physician fee in Germany, a rich nation, or in the US, it's a fraction. If you compare an MRI, it's a fraction. And open heart surgery is a fraction. And the medicines also the same. But it was very clear to me that the medicines are way more sensitive issue because affects the out-of-pocket of people. They go and the president was adamant. So I knew that the genie is out of the bottle now, and we need to find a solution. At the same time, he came with his views on tariffs that were posing also another big threat on us, because over years, of decades, the way that the manufacturing operated, all our on-patent products are made offshore, or the off-patent products are made here. If you see how many medicines we made in the US, us and the industry in general, but us particularly because we are one of the largest manufacturers in the US, the vast majority of our medicines are made here. But the very expensive medicines are made outside for very, very different reasons over decades. So we couldn't change it overnight. A manufacturing site in our case needs at least 5 years from the day you break ground all the way until a product comes out of the door. Tariffs were imminent. So I realized that those two things needs to be resolved. And they were creating a significant uncertainty over our entire sector. The multiples of the sector were at historical low this year. And the funding for biotech was at historical low that year. And those two overhangs were an important reason for that. So After lengthy discussions and negotiations, basically, I came to the conclusion that we need to cut a deal. We had very regular discussions with HHS, and I told them, I'm ready to cut a deal. Let's sit and do it. And within 10 days, we signed.
Wow, fast.
Very, very fast. Once you make the decision, that's it. You move very fast.
And I think Americans will feel it, which is important.
I think Americans will feel it, and the industry will feel it. I knew when I did that I'm going to drive the entire pharmaceutical industry to this direction. If Pfizer moves and does something like that, will be very difficult for anybody else to take a different path. I knew that.
What does it feel like as a leader to know that you can move a whole industry with your decisions and the pressure that puts on you to make sure you're making the right ones?
A lot of pressure. I knew that it is not only about the Pfizer, it is about the industry. And when we speak about the pharmaceutical industry, we're talking about the lives of our kids, of our parents, of our beloved ones. This is where the innovation turns into people saving their lives or having much better life. So I knew it would be consequential. And I didn't only want to resolve a financial issue. I wanted to make sure that I create the conditions that funding will go back to biotech. So biotech will still be very productive. And then we will acquire some of them. And then we will develop medicines. That was a game changer for all of us. That could go one way or another. And I think we found the perfect balance and solution to drive things positively for the patients and for the industry. And I'm sure everybody will fall into that.
I think affordability comes into the question of there's a lack of trust in general in our nation. I think the healthcare and pharma industries have felt it quite a bit from consumers. And I think drug pricing is one of them. People don't understand why are American drugs so expensive. I think also from the pandemic, despite the fact that Pfizer rode to the rescue and should be viewed as a hero very much so, there's also skepticism about how vaccines were sort of enforced on the country. And people have feelings about the medical advice they were receiving at the time. What do you think about those criticisms? And how do you start repairing the trust as a leader who can move the whole industry?
I think the Americans, they complain about drug pricing not because they have in mind what Germans are paying. They have no idea. They complain about the drug pricing because they know that drugs, they have to pay money way more than when they do an MRI, when they do even a hospital visit, when they do the physician visit. Because the way that the system works is you have insurance. And insurance makes sure that everybody is flattened out. So you're not facing the catastrophe. I need to do now 10 visits to the doctor and 3 MRIs and the surgery, and then I bankrupt because of that. That is not happening because it pretty much is working in a lot of cases, but not for medicines. Because for medicines, we have an anomaly in the way that the PBMs or the people that are negotiating the prices can actually make their money not out of a fee for their service, but out of the spread between how much is the net price and the gross price, and how much, because someone needs to pay that difference, they are pushing it to the patients. So basically for medicines, people are paying for their medicines like if they don't have insurance, although they have in the US one of the most expensive insurances that exist in the world. That's what created a lot of pressure because they didn't know who to blame. And for many, many years, they were only blaming the pharmaceutical company. I think that has changed both in the public opinion, but also in the feelings of politicians, in Congress, for example, that are responsible for that the PBMs, that these middlemen, they have a very, very big part of their responsibility. That we can see now by partisan bills, which is very rare in our days, about resolving and transforming this middleman intervention. I think once we fix that, people will see that they are out of pocket. It is reasonable, and that will encourage people to take their medicines, but they are not. That on the drug price. On the vaccines, I think it's easy to criticize now the Biden administration, but many people will say maybe they shouldn't put mandates. Many people said that they should, they did the right thing. Frankly, for the US, I was always under the impression that we should not have mandates. because Americans have a very free spirit. It's very different than Scandinavians.
Yes, we're hard to control.
They don't like that, right? So, and if you do it, there will be significant backlash. Let's understand that mandates for vaccinations were not only in America, were in France, Germany, Israel, Romania, you name every country in the world, they all did the same. All of them. All of them mandated masks, all of them mandated vaccines, and all of them had social distancing. In the US, everything that's mandated by government backfires. And I think that's what happened during that time. But this doesn't mean that it was necessarily the wrong medical advice. It was the same like in every other country. It was maybe the wrong political way of going after it. But a lot of lives were saved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important point to remember. And it seems like, I know you've said science will win in the end. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there, but vaccines are still such an important part of preventative care.
They're not still. They are the most important part. It is what increased the lifespan in that century, in the 20th century, by more than 30 years. It is predominantly because of the discovery from Louis Pasteur back in the day of a vaccine against rabies. And then we realized that we can really control diseases that were decimating our population. The children mortality was huge at that period of time and has all been reversed because of vaccinations. The disinformation that circulates right now is not only without any merit, but it is very dangerous because it discourages people. This is scientific information. Not everyone is qualified to understand the plus and the minuses. That's why we were constantly relying on the opinion of the experts. But experts were not lawyers. Experts were doctors, right? Experts were people that they had credentials in the scientific community, that were elected from the American Association of Pediatricians to be in their board and their scientific board, and they can issue a recommendation. By the CDC, that was having an independent committee that people were debating, but were the top vaccinologists. And that's how people used to do. When they hear them saying, do it or don't do it, they would follow. Now, unfortunately, we have people that they're not like that. They are lawyers, or they are one scientist out of not 100, of 10,000 that they disagree with what the remaining 9,999 are saying. But they get a very big microphone and they confuse people. And that's unfortunately what we are living today.
And do you think that that will sort itself out, or are you worried that this is a continuing trend?
No, I think it will correct itself. Will correct itself, and I hope sooner rather than later. My only concern is if that will correct itself because of political changes, or if that will correct itself because we will see so many people dying that will trigger political changes. Because these decisions have consequences.
Absolutely.
Dire consequences. And we see that with measles right now, and you can see it with many other things, hepatitis, you name it.
BOURLA'S embraced AI in Pfizer's research and development process. The company was ranked as a leader among pharmaceutical companies for its use of AI, and they've invested heavily in partnerships with biotech and pharma tech companies to see how machine learning and predictive models could help with drug discovery and safe market introduction.
So I want to now look forward into what you've called the science renaissance moment we're in. There's so much happening with AI. People consider it to be the most transformative technology perhaps to ever exist. They liken it to electricity, and it will touch and transform everything. And I'm curious, from your vantage point at Pfizer and in the pharma industry, how much has AI already changed what you're able to do? And when it's fully realized, how much more is there to gain?
It's changing dramatically what we can do. The technology today cannot do everything in AI, but certainly can do way more than we are using it for. So I think The winners will, in that field will be separated by the losers, not by their ability to select the right technology or the right vendor. Is it Google? Is it OpenAI? Is it Croc? But their ability to transform their own organizations in ways that will embrace AI, will overcome resistance, will overcome the pessimism that the AI sometimes creates. Oh my God, we are going to lose our jobs. Rather the optimist, oh my God, we are going to cure cancer. And that's, I think, what will happen with the current technology. But technology in AI is really moving very fast. And not in a year or two, but in weeks and months. And could transform the way that we discover, develop, manufacture medicines.
Is it speeding up the R&D process already or the drug discovery process already? Or is there still a ways to go before you really see the timeline?
Speeding it already. I will give you a good example. We spoke a little bit about the vaccine, but we didn't speak about Paxlovid, which was the treatment against COVID. Paxlovid was a medicine that was discovered, and we finalized the preclinical piece in 4 months. Usually takes 4 years. We did that by using machine learning at that time. Usually, the way that we select a molecule that we can test them, does it work, is it safe, etc., is happening in the lab. And it's happening by really formulating millions of molecules with robots. And then we test them, and then we try to discover among those millions the ones that are very successful. Usually, let's say 3 million molecules. 4 years that will take. With Paxlovid, we use a computer not to discover medicine, but to design it. A medicine that can stop the virus should look like. And the computer designed 600 examples of that. So we synthesize 600 molecules and we test them in the tubes, then in animals. And then based on that, we selected very few, but we tested in primates. And then one that we started the studies in humans. So 4 years to 4 months, that's dramatic. And that is translated to hundreds of thousands of lives.
Wow. So Albert, you run a global company and you have a vantage point from, yes, the United States, but really from everywhere, including China. I'm wondering, as you look at the landscape in pharma and in medicine and where everything is headed, what you see happening abroad, particularly in that part of the world, and what we need to be aware of here in the United States.
You know, in the last 20, 25 years, the US is dominating the biomedical research. Everything is happening here. Even European companies are doing that here. And the first time that someone is challenging the US dominance is China. It's not Europe. Europe is really going backwards, I would say, in terms of technology. And Japan is not progressing at all. Actually, they are also going backwards. But Chinese are going forward with double the speed and half the cost of what we use to. They are investing tremendous amounts behind their innovation. They are investing in biotech, and they have created an ocean of biotechs. They are investing in universities. They are investing in hospitals that they can do research. And they are producing right now in peer magazines, all the scientific magazines, that is so difficult to get a publication in because the quality needs to be extremely, extremely high and very competitive. They dominate the Chinese authors. In CRISPR, it's a gene editing technology that we just discussed. In 2024, more than 40% of the publications were from Chinese authors. In structural biology, which they were always good, more than 60% were from Chinese authors. So it's not that China right now, they are copying. I mean, they are copying as well, like we copy one another, but they are producing very high science. That's good, I think, for patients. But from our perspective, if we want to be the ones who offer the solutions, we need to take that seriously into consideration. If I have to give an advice to all the people that they worry for national security reasons about that, and probably they're right, but they put too much emphasis, 80% of their focus and energy is how to slow down China rather than how to become better than them. 80% of our effort, 80% of our brain power should go, what do I need to change to become better than them? How can I take the unique advantages of our political system, of our university, of our biotech, and do the right policy changes, do the right investments, so we can become better than them. And that's what will define the success or failure of the US biomedical community.
Yes, the idea of slowing the pace there seems like a lost cause. I mean, they are off to the races. There's no slowing that momentum. So
we will never slow them down. They are very good, and we should just become better if we want to win.
And so when you look ahead, what kind of medical advancements do you think will be achievable in our lifetime that if when you were joining Pfizer 30 years ago, you would have said, no way?
I think we will have cure for cancer, for many of the cancers at least.
What about like stage 4 if you get diagnosed? Do you think that'll be eventually manageable?
I think the interventions will start earlier and will have better results, but you will find ways to have dramatically better results in later stages, which is what we are doing already right now. I think that we should be able, as I said, to cure, but also for the remaining that are not cured, will become a chronic disease. You can live with your cancer like you live with your diabetes. Do something in the morning, or you are a little bit careful with something, but you have a normal life that is not predicted to end within 2 or 3 years. That's big. I think we will resolve neuroscience problems. All this dementia, Alzheimer's, even Parkinson, are things that right now we don't have solutions, or the solutions that exist are, let's say, not highly satisfactory. I think we will come to highly satisfactory solutions, and AI, together with biology, will play a key role.
So as you look at your 30-year career here, and hopefully many more years as well, and you're leaving advice for other future leaders, people who want to successfully run major companies and lead with integrity their workforces to do incredible things, what advice would you leave them with? What's like the one big takeaway that you've had from all of your experience that you think other leaders could benefit from learning?
I would say one thing. In big corporations, like in families, like in groups of people that they do something together, you need to have both pessimists and optimists. The optimists have the vision, the pessimists lend you to reality and avoiding pitfalls. But I will give 2 lines of advice. One, it is that pessimists are usually right, but nothing great on this earth has been accomplished without an optimist behind it. Nothing. And the second, for a leader, we all appreciate to have around pessimists, but no one follows them. Maybe people listen to them, but the pessimist doesn't have followers. Everybody follows an optimist. That's the one who can inspire them. So you see my message. You want to be a successful leader? Bring a team around you that lend you to reality, but be the optimist.
Well, from optimist to optimist, I appreciate that advice, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Great, great pleasure.